I never thought a school trip could scar you for life. It started like any other ordinary fall trip. Our middle school chorus was taking a 3-day trip to Woodloch Pines Resort in Pennsylvania. The bus ride was long and boring, and my best friend Landon and I kept ourselves occupied with half-hearted jokes and counting the trees outside. The resort itself looked beautiful in the late November chill, a quiet lake reflecting the pale moon, the forest surrounding it dark and foreboding. From the moment we arrived, it felt off, not in a scary way at first, just a weird, quiet stillness like the place was abandoned except for us. But I'd soon learn that appearances can be deceiving. We were assigned our rooms quickly, and Landon and I ended up sharing one on the ground floor, with a sliding glass door that looked straight out onto the lake. That first evening, we went out with a couple of girls from our group. We did go-karting, climbed rocks, swam in the pool. By the time we returned to the room exhausted, the night had fully settled. For some reason, I left the blinds to the sliding door open. Moonlight spilled over the water and created a silver path down to the lake. It was beautiful, serene even, but I didn't know it would be the start of something completely unexplainable. We were tossing around in our beds, trying to get comfortable. Landon was closer to the door. Suddenly, he screamed. Not a joke scream, but a real bone-chilling, terrified scream. My heart froze in my chest. I looked over, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A tall, thin woman with grayish hair pressed her hands against the glass. Her eyes locked on us, unblinking, her mouth forming some expression I can't describe. She didn't knock, she didn't speak, she just stood there staring. Then as suddenly as she appeared, she walked away. We bolted up, hearts hammering, and ran outside to follow her. Nothing. The cement path was empty, the grass around the building barren. No sign of anyone. We both knew we weren't imagining it. The next day, we told 2 of our friends, but avoided the chaperones. That night, after more activities, we returned to our room, and this time I made sure to shut the blinds. Landon fell asleep before me. Around 4 a.m., I woke up to silence, but something felt wrong. My instincts screamed at me. I turned toward Landon's bed to check on him. He wasn't there. Something blocked my view, and then, towering above me, was the same woman. She whispered, "Your back door was unlocked," before turning and leaving. I froze in terror, shaking uncontrollably. By morning, we discovered she wasn't alone. There was an older man in the neighboring room. Both seemed off, mentally unstable. Staff didn't remove them. We had to cut the trip short. That image of the woman standing at my bed, whispering that line, remains burned in my memory. Even now, years later, I can close my eyes and see her long gray hair, her skeletal hands pressed against the glass. I still don't know who they were, why they were there, or what they wanted. And I'm not sure I want to know. When I think back to my childhood, there are memories that feel like they belong in a nightmare rather than real life. One of those memories happened during a 4th-grade field trip to a small rural zoo, about an hour outside our school. It was a cloudy day, with the occasional drizzle making the red brick pathways slick and shiny. At the time, I was the kind of kid who liked to wander, to observe things other kids didn't notice. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something darker, I don't know. The zoo itself was modest. It had a handful of small animal habitats, some kid-friendly interactive exhibits, and a large building filled with taxidermied animals. It was supposed to be educational, but to me it felt eerie even then. The dim lighting inside the building cast long shadows over the lifeless animals, their glass eyes glinting in the occasional flicker of overhead lights. I remember feeling a shiver run down my spine, the way the silence in the hallways contrasted with the chatter and laughter outside. At some point, I decided to slip away from the group. I went to the restroom without telling anyone. My teachers were distracted by other students. After washing my hands, I wandered down one of the hallways we hadn't explored yet. The red carpet felt strange beneath my shoes, and the dim, moody lights made everything seem alive. That's when I noticed him. A man, obviously hiding behind a stack of chairs. At first I laughed. I thought maybe he was playing a joke, trying to scare me. But then he came around the chairs and approached me. His eyes were dark, cold. He asked where the rest of the group had gone. I said I didn't know, and without thinking I followed him, thinking he was just helping me find the group. The hallway gave way to an exit door that led outside, past dumpsters and benches into the woods beyond the zoo. That's when his grip on my arm tightened, not enough to hurt me yet, but enough to make my stomach turn with fear. He was trying to pull me into the trees. I didn't scream, maybe shock froze me, but I felt my heart trying to leap out of my chest. Then a scream tore through the air. One of my teachers had noticed me, had seen what was happening, and her voice was pure panic. The man let go instantly and ran into the woods, disappearing almost like smoke. A few teachers rushed to the door and ushered me back inside, their hands gripping my shoulders, shaking me, yelling at me, but also comforting me at the same time. They called my parents, the police were notified, and the field trip ended early. On the bus ride home, I tried to ignore the staring faces of my classmates. I kept my head down, my hands curled tightly in my lap. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw him, crouched in the woods just past the edge of the fence. He was watching us leave. My stomach turned. My brain screamed to shout, to tell someone, but I stayed quiet. Part of me didn't want to believe what I had seen. Part of me felt powerless. I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. But the feeling of being so close to real danger has stayed with me all my life. Years later, I try to revisit that moment in my mind, reconstructing every step, every second. I remember the way the wet grass smelled after the drizzle, the flickering fluorescent light over the taxidermied animals, the echo of my own footsteps in the empty hallways. I remember the cold iron of the man's hand gripping my wrist and the relief that came when the teacher screamed. And I remember the sight of him crouched in the woods, waiting, watching as the bus drove away. It's a memory that refuses to fade, one that crawls back whenever I visit a zoo or see a field trip in a movie. And sometimes late at night I can't help but wonder, if that teacher hadn't screamed, if my frozen feet had failed me, would I still be here telling this story? The thought terrifies me even now. Back in high school, I took a class that focused on mysteries, folklore, and creepy historical events. It wasn't a typical class. We were encouraged to explore and investigate, to think critically about the unexplained. That's how, one chilly autumn morning, my friend Ben and I ended up on a field trip to an abandoned village not far from our town. The village had been built in the early 1900s, but was abandoned almost immediately. Nobody knew exactly why. Some said it was cursed. Others said the townspeople had simply left for better opportunities. Whatever the reason, the building stood like hollowed-out teeth in the forest, crumbling but stubbornly intact. The bus ride was short, about 20 minutes, but the anticipation made it feel longer. As we pulled up, I couldn't stop staring through the bus window. The road leading to the village was cracked and overgrown with grass, flanked by dense, almost suffocating forest. There were about 20 of us on the trip, plus our teacher, and she lined us up for a head count before leading the way. The village itself was strange. Some buildings had holes in the walls as if someone had tried to enter from unusual angles. Some of the basements had makeshift ladders. The place smelled of mold, wet earth, and age, a smell that seemed to seep into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Ben and I, naturally curious and probably too reckless, decided to explore a taller building apart from the main group. We slipped behind the teacher's back and approached it cautiously. There was a hole dug near the back door with a ladder descending into darkness. I felt the familiar thrill of fear mixed with adrenaline as Ben climbed down first, followed by me. Our phones provided a weak source of light, but it was enough to illuminate dust-covered wooden planks, shattered glass, and a few old beer bottles scattered across the floor. The deeper we went, the darker it became. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the silence was oppressive. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic. At first we walked carefully, exploring small rooms off the main hallways, listening for any signs of movement from outside. The only sounds were our breathing, the creaking of the century-old wood, and the occasional scuttle of rodents. Then we saw it, a wooden stairway leading to a higher floor, a floor with no windows, just darkness. Each step groaned under our weight, threatening to collapse at any moment. At the top, we found ourselves in a tight corridor with multiple small rooms branching off. Ben's flashlight caught graffiti on the walls, some scribbles, some symbols I didn't recognize. The hair on my arm stood on end. That's when we heard it, a loud, hollow thump from one of the rooms. Our instincts screamed at us to run, but curiosity, stupidity, or both made us inch closer. As we approached, we shone our lights into the room, and we froze. Standing there, maybe 10 feet away, were 3 men. Not moving, not speaking, just watching. Their faces were partially hidden in shadow, but the way they stood, rigid, calm, almost ceremonial, sent a chill straight to my bones. I whispered to Ben, and he nodded, just as pale as me. We backed away slowly, hearts pounding, and ran back down the stairs, up the ladder, and rejoined the group, breathless and shaken. We didn't tell anyone what we saw. Not the teacher, not our classmates. Who would believe us? Who even knew if what we saw was real? It could have been some drifters or trespassers, or maybe something else. My mind kept replaying the image of those three figures standing silently, unblinking, almost hauntingly calm. As we left the village, I couldn't help but glance at the tallest building one last time. A face, pale, expressionless, almost like a mannequin's, stared at us from one of the upper windows that hadn't been boarded up. I shivered and turned away, but the image lingered. Years later, I still think about that day. I imagine returning, sneaking inside again to find out the truth. Were they ghosts? Homeless people? Something beyond explanation? I don't know. I don't want to know. But the memory is imprinted on my mind like a scar. The smell of mildew, the creaking wood, the darkness pressing down on me, and those three figures that seem to exist outside time. Sometimes, I wonder if I would recognize them if I returned, or if they'd recognize me. And sometimes, just sometimes, I feel like they're still watching, waiting.